not turnout is because we have an outstanding speaker. We actually have an outstanding pair of speakers.
Thanks.
And you know,
Yes.
this is the fourth time Rick has spoken to ABC at Greenwich. And we've invited him back because he's so good. One of the things you know, you don't like the speaker, they're not invited back.
Oh.
Well, Rick is definitely.
That's very hard.
So I'm not gonna list his accomplishments. They're in the flyer. I just want to say, I'm quite jealous here because these two have done what most people always dream about. So we've gotten an early start tonight because they got 9,000 miles of cruising to talk about. So we want to give them enough time to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to let you tell us all about your dream. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I will. So we got an awful lot to cover. I'm going to go pretty quickly. So let's hold all of the questions until the end, if we could, please. There's a lot of wine and food back there. If you feel the need, please go get it. I won't be offended, but if you walk out, that's a whole nother story. Okay. So the boat is a 43-foot Brewer, Ted Brewer cutter. It's a 1981. I've had it for 20-something years and have had it long enough to rebuild everything in it. And what's nice is I got to rebuild it all myself. And I've been in the marine industry for, I don't know, 40, whatever years. And it was nice because I could buy things wholesale. But I was able to slowly, refurbish the boat. And I've had this dream about doing this project since I was 15 or so. So if you saw Brigantine Yankee, travels the world, that planted all the seeds. So here's the little pictures of inside the boat. It's number 11 out of 15 semi-custom. The original owner sailed it home from Taiwan, so it's been around the world twice. And I've replaced, as I said, pretty much everything, including all the rigging. And this year we've got a new mainsail coming in. We've got an enclosed pilot house, so it's really comfortable. And what our best crewmate, no, I'm sorry, is our wind vane. With a wind vane, we've steered maybe 10% of the whole trip. We've done this year was 9,000 miles. So the goal was to start off from the East Coast, go down towards the Panama Canal to the San Blas Islands, through the canal, hit Galapagos, then down to Ecuador, then go across the South Pacific and work our way around. And COVID got in the way. So the boat got stuck in Ecuador and I had to actually steal the boat back because they tried to get money from me that wasn't due. And I brought it back to Panama. So it held everything up. So we ended up doing this convoluted route and then took the boat ultimately the year before last up to Mexico, to the first town that's in Mexico. We were going to try and get to the Baja, but that's like 2,000 miles and it was mostly upwind and it was a horrible slog. So we just said, okay, heck with this. We're going to pull into Mexico. We ended up doing some inland tours and got to see some really great ruins and things like that. And that was 11 days and 1,000 miles to get up to Mexico. So finally, it was the beginning of our season. So the big key here was to get out of Mexico and head to the Galapagos Islands. So here was our trip in the green to get to Galapagos. And of course, it's upwind. Why is it that coming back from Galapagos? Yeah, and so you see us going up and tacking back and forth, and it was like not very fun. So we were able to get there. It was 12 miserable days. So we got to the Galapagos and we had to cross the equator for the third time. So it was once to Ecuador, once back, and now the third time. And I tried to slow the boat down and it doesn't say 000. I'm sorry, we were going too fast. Like 4.2 knots. So we arrived at St. Cristobal. When you get to the Galapagos, you're only allowed to go to 3 islands if you're on a private yacht. So, and it costs like $2,000 or something to get in. If you really want to see all the islands, you've got to hire a naturalist and an advisor and somebody else and get special permission. and it cost you an arm and a leg. And so we just went to the 3 islands, and then we took day trips from there. So that was actually fun. So going ashore in the Galapagos on the right-hand picture, I saw 5 indigenous species in the first 10 minutes. A marine iguana, a seal, a red crab, a pelican, and a blue-footed booby. And I took the picture and said, okay, we can leave. So it was a very busy harbor. Here you can see the AIS picture. There were commercial dive boats, tour boats, cruisers. It was really busy. And you can see actually the red on the chart is the radar overlay. And we use the radar to make sure that the charts are actually correct. And in some of these beaches, there were more seals than people. So we took a walk on St. Cristobal, and we saw the famous mailbox where boats would leave mail going to another place, and then they would sort through it, and a boat going to like New York would take all the New York mail and bring it with them. There were seals all over the beach. Seals take over the town. And on the docks, in the dinghies, up the aft cockpits of boats that had a slipper stern or a sugar scoop transom. It was a vibrant little village. There were 28,000 people, lots of hikes and wildlife. Wait, and did you see the turtles cavorting? Okay. So, yes. So here's a blue-footed booby and a blue-footed chick.
We are actually standing right next to that bird. That is not a zoom in picture. They have no concerns about people. Very comfortable.
Absolutely fearless.
It was season for having all the birds being born, so it was very.
So here we are for a day of exploration. We saw the Tortoise Reserve. We hiked up the volcano. I rode a horse, and we hiked through a mangrove tunnel, and it was amazing. In one case, we're walking through this walkway, and they tell you stay on the walkways. The turtles are all around, and this turtle is lumbering through the walkway. We're like, we're in the bushes, and he's on the walkway.
And that volcano is actually not water. What you're overlooking there is just 12 miles of magma, and there's actually a village of Indians. You're on the wrong.
Yeah, okay.
A village, yeah, on the right there. It's just a village of Indians that actually made their home there. So that is just 12 miles of magma.
Yeah, that's not a seascape. That's a
Yes,
volcanoscape. So there were amazing sites to visit, and there were beautiful restaurants along the beach. So a lot of them really struggled to survive COVID. So the ones that did were really happy to have people back in again.
This is the island of Isabella, by the way. We've moved on to the second island.
So the Galapagos also were very far ahead of the other islands where they had e-bikes and scooters all over the place. And so they were very, very aggressive. Now, coming into the Galapagos, we had to check our bottom, make sure there was not even one barnacle. They put a diver overboard to check. If you have anything, they will fine you and send you 20 miles offshore. They give us trash cans to try and fill in, but they wouldn't just let us mark on, this is garbage, this is recycle, this is whatever. We had to get out the printer and print little signs to go on the things. And then when we finally brought the garbage inside, we said, okay, well, we've got, garbage, recycles, this and that, 4 different bags. They said, what do you want to do with this? And they said, oh, put it in the dumpster over there. So we rode bikes around. We had both. Oh, the tunnel. The tunnels are created by lava flows. So when the lava is flowing down, the outside shell cools and then the inside continues running. And then ultimately the inside runs out, leaving this big tunnel. And some of these were huge. The one on the right was the second largest tunnel in South America. It was 1 kilometer long and 60 feet underground, 2 million years old. Really quite amazing. So the seals take over every flat space that's sunlit. And then this is the very famous Charles Darwin statue overlooking Eagle Bay in San Cristobal. So we took a day trip out to snorkel at Kicker Rock. So we hop on this panga, or a boat that was delivering people out. We probably had about 8 or 10 other people with us. And we go for 45 minutes out around the coast. We come to this rock and hop into the water. So Kicker Rock has both diversity and sheer quantity of marine creatures. And you can also swim with the sea lions. So we're swimming around there thinking it's wonderful. And the cliffs of the rock just go straight down. So it's all beautiful coral and things on the sides. But then as you go down, you start to see the fish and the other stuff. And as we swam around the corner, this is what we saw 20 feet under us. So I can tell you, I swam around the corner and all of a sudden I like, holy crap. And my heart starts beating. And then I see about 6 or 8 more coming and my heart's going like this. But it turns out that they're not a threat to divers. They're not responsible for any attacks. They need to be treated with respect, but they actually eat herring and sardines. So, and they, you know, when our leader went down with his GoPro to try and film them, they acted like little fish and swam away. That was fine with us. So here's provisioning in the French market, or the farmers market on the last island, Santa Cruz. We had our backpacks and everything loaded because we had to walk from the boat all the way up to this market. The problem with the market is everybody sells the same thing. So you've got to spend 45 minutes going up and down saying, oh, this lettuce looks a little better than that one. And this look. So we went through everything and finally able to load up. So we load up with all the goodies and brought it back to the boat. And the anchorage was really rolling. So, you know, sometimes you've got to put out a second anchor because the wind's blowing this way and you'll sit in the wind, but the swells are coming this way. So you're rolling. So you've got to put out an anchor and bring yourself so that you're pointing into the swells because it's much easier to go up and down than it is to go sideways. So this is getting fuel delivered. You don't pull up to a gas dock. You've got to make the arrangements all in advance and they bring it all out in a panga in 20-gallon cans. And I'm like, oh my God, how are we going to get these on the deck and siphon them off? And they said, oh, no problem. We've got a 12-volt pump. So he clips it onto the battery and this thing starts hitting diesel. It worked like a charm. And here we are, finally ready to leave the Galapagos to head for French Polynesia. So now, this is the big thing. French Polynesia from the Galapagos is 20-something days, and it's 3,257 miles, I counted. So COVID still had Easter Island and Pitcairn and closed. So that was on our goal. We were trying to go down to Easter and Pitcairn and then get to the Marquesas. And only until we were 3/4 of the way through our trip did they open up. And I really resent that. I wanted to see those. That was my bucket list places for me. So here we are underway. So the trip took 23 days. And you can see us surfing off waves and kind of going along in the trade winds. So the wind blows from the east to the west. And the goal here is to basically go downwind. And if you do it right, and if you miss something, you've got to go back upwind to get there. So we had hooked up with a couple of other boats that we were going to buddy boat with. And what we ended up doing is we tried single sideband, which didn't work. We ended up using our Iridium Go, which is a satellite communication system. We have an email, and they all did too. So we would email them every morning at 10 o'clock with our position, what we had done, what we had for dinner last night, any fun things going on. And they would, one of them, emailed and said, we're frying up flying fish for breakfast. And after pulling off every morning, we have flying fish watch, and you have to go out on the deck and pull up like 8 or 10 of these dead things. They're slimy, yucky things and throw them overboard. So we weren't about to eat those. There were days you couldn't see the horizon. The horizon, the sky and the water would just match together, and you couldn't tell the difference. So we saw like 2 ships, maybe 3, on the whole time, mostly on AIS, just going by in the distance. But we saw fleets of Chinese fishing boats, and they've got dozens of little boats and all the nets and everything there, and you had to make sure that you really avoided those. So we just would sail around them. So the wind was mostly from behind. It was uneventful. The goal of a good trip like this is to pick your weather window and get moving. And you can only forecast 4 or 5 days out, but I was able to download weather every day, multiple times. Much Candy's dismay that I spent way too much time downloading weather that says downwind, still blowing 20. We carried 170 gallons of diesel between 2 tanks and 5 jerry cans. And if you look behind Candy on the foredeck on the right, you'll see the striped things on the ground, on the deck. Those are the jerry jugs, and you've got to cover them with, I found some matching t-shirts at a dollar store, to keep the sun off of them, because the sun will break down the jerry jugs. So it was really quite amazing. And then now and then we had our spinnaker up and just sailing along, and then there was always repairs to be done. Just remember, the definition of cruising is boat repair in exotic places. So one time in the middle of the night, we're sailing along and I'm noticing now, part of my watch is I'm on watch, and every now and then I go down and I make a book tag. So I go down and I open the floorboards and I'll look at the things and I'll see if there's water and I'll just get a feel, come all the way back. And I was like, wow, the bilge pump has been running. What's going on? And I trace it back and it's coming from the stern. And I'm thinking, man, the rudder post. And it wasn't the rudder post. I go back and it turns out that a hose on a through hull from a deck drain had gotten a little soft and was just dripping a little. So at the middle of the night, I pull out the life raft, all this stuff, all these, I mean, just a pile in the cockpit. Now, realize we're keeled over at about 15, 18 degrees in 20 knots of breeze with the wind vane steering. So Candy helps me get all the stuff out of the thing and put it in the cockpit. And then I start climbing down there and said, oh, 5 feet of 1.5 inch hose, I've got that. And I replaced the hose. And at one point, Candy said, I've got to go to sleep. I can't handle this. So she went down and crashed, and I was able to get everything done back together, and we didn't sink. And I was very proud of myself. And then you have just another Pacific sunset. So the Pacific is huge. The island groups are in the trade winds. Okay, so we're able to hop from one group to another. And the first destination was in French Polynesia, was a group called the Marquesas. So, you see this chart here, and you see it here again, that, it's nice to see all the islands. And from here on out, they're all relatively close together. But it took 3,000 miles to get to the first one. So here we are entering the Marquesas. We went to the Hiva Oa, the very first one, formed by upswelling the volcanoes and magma. It's an outpost of France. It's only 400 square miles between all the islands, only 9,000 people, and the tallest peak is 4,000 feet. But the water surrounding the islands is 13,000 feet deep. So you get an idea of what it's all about. And then remember in the Galapagos, our bottom was pristine. It was like really clean. It just came from Mexico. We just launched the boat. It was perfect. Well, this is what it looked like after crossing the Pacific. So we had gooseneck barnacles, and it took us almost half a day in the dinghy, one at either end of the dinghy, with putty knives and suction cups holding on to try and scrape the things off the boat. So we had a little rip in our our jib, because our furling extrusions had separated and pinched the jib, but there was a sailmaker there who was able to put it back together. And I was able to get the thing fixed when we went to another harbor, and I'm waiting for the swells to abate so I can go up the forestay, which is really fun. So we finally get there, and about 10 o'clock at night, the swell stopped, and I said, I've got to go now. And Candy looked at me in horror, because it meant we've got an electric winch handle, which is it saves us. So we put that in the mast, put me on the bosun's chair, and I went up the forestay, and I had to undo these little tiny set screws, put on some Loctite, and put them all back in together and lock the thing down together. So, you got to be self-sufficient in a case like this. So this is one of our first anchorages. And on the left, we were having breakfast because we had agreed that whoever would arrive first got to serve breakfast to the boat that arrived next. So our friends rowed over in these little tiny kayaks that they use instead of a dinghy. I don't know why. And she handed us some baguettes, and she handed us some what were they, croissants? Pastries and things. And she said, oh, I'm sorry for the pastries. They were in the bottom of the dinghy. And brought them to us. But I got to tell you, it was a wonderful, wonderful breakfast, and we were very, very pleased. And we're still staying in touch with them. So on this island, Paul Gauguin lived there and was studied and did a lot of artwork there. But there's a museum, but none of his pieces, the original pieces, are there. It's just a museum of copies. So Marquesas included 15 islands. We visited 5. Going from one side of Hiva Oa to the other was really difficult, and you can see us trying to go around. The wind sweeps over the top of the mountains, and here I'm heading around the edge of the island saying, great, we're going to be in the lead. There's going to be no wind. There's going to be nothing. And no, it channels around from the other side and over the top. So everywhere we went was dead upwind. So we decided at that point, we're going to rent a car next time and just leave the leave the boat in one spot. So, and you can see from the tops of the mountains, all these cutbacks and things. Sometimes there were cows on it. Sometimes there were herds of goats on the roads. But we rented a 4-wheel drive Toyota, and I didn't get it ever into third gear. It was always first and second all the way around. So, but you're up 4,000 feet, and these roads are right on the edge of the cliffs. Oh, I'm sorry, just another sunset. So almost everyone in the Marquesas has a tattoo. And some of them are tribal tattoos, but they consider them body armor that could ultimately cover the head to toe. There are special patterns for each tribe, and they're also done to symbolize events such as coming of age for a young kid. The women love their floral hats, and almost every girl has a flower over her ear. There were tikis and carvings everywhere. The people are incredibly friendly and very, very proud of their history and ancestors. They colonized the islands between 300 AD and 1000 AD, at a dense population that was almost wiped out by the arrival of the European explorers in 1526. And they brought especially smallpox that really wiped people out. So the tiki stone carvings were everywhere. These are modern ones. And we were on a mission to discover the ancient tikis in the stone platforms. So as we did so, here we found them. There are many ancient sites that are left. Some of them have been swallowed up by jungle brush, and some of them have been immaculately kept with covers over the top of these ancient tikis. So it was nice to see them taking care of it. Now, this is a stone pit where the islanders kept their sacrificial humans before ritually killing them and cooking them. They believed they would ingest their victims' knowledge, strength, and bravery. And we learned that only the chiefs and the religious leaders actually ate people. The regular tribal people didn't. So about 150 years ago, cannibalism was still being practiced, and many of the islands don't talk about it at all. They really just don't want to recognize that it happened. So we were.
The missionaries came, and that's what stopped cannibalism. But they introduced civilization.
Yes.
And basically explained it, so they were able to stop cannibalism.
To the point where they have actually changed the dancing, so the dancing wasn't quite so risque. It was a little more sedate. So here we were hopping along looking for some ancient ruins and along the road, and we happened on this. Oops.
Cannibal dinner.
Cannibal dinner, yeah.
The communities would just get together after church or in an afternoon, and they all just love to sing and the other have community, and they flop in ukuleles and.
So it was amazing. And we went up and said, hey, can we take pictures? And they said, yes, definitely, but from over there. So we hiked up with some other cruisers we had met in the harbor, searching for an ancient site. So we found this man who lived by himself in a small hut. We worked really hard to communicate with him because he could only speak French, and our French was un petit peu. So he was once the winner of a boxing competition for the Pacific Island Games. And you can see on the left-hand picture, he was posing for us under his boxing picture. He then offered to take us to the tiki ruins, and he rode the horse, and we walked up the steep, overgrown hillside. So here we are up in the hillside, and what we discovered was amazing. It wasn't identified or preserved. It was a village site with ancient tiki carvings halfway up the mountainside.
So he was apparently an owner of the property, and the council has been given money by the government to take care of these properties. Unfortunately, because of the corruption, the money never gets to where it should be, and the properties were never taken care of.
But you can see the size of the tikis, and just it's really unfortunate. These aren't covered; they're out in the wild. Ultimately they're going to go away. But there were other ones that were covered and really, really maintained well, and marked a little better too, because it was really tough to find this guy. So we did a walk. We were near Daniels Bay, and the next day over, we took a hike to the waterfall, and we hiked to a house where they served lunch to hikers. Great food, and you instantly become part of the family. And if you look on the left-hand photo, the little white dot at the bottom of the left picture, that's me. So we saw this sign along the road, And if on the bottom right or left, you can see the wood. There was a woodcutter who was harvesting wood from his area, and this beautiful, beautiful reds and almost mahogany type woods and all. And they were cutting them all to the right size because they'd ship them off or give them to the wood carvers, and the wood carvers would use these woods to carve their tikis that they sold in the shops and things as a tourist. It was the way they made their money, is carving turkey.
So this was the walkway towards that waterfall you just saw, and what was so beautiful is just along the walk, you would see the stone platforms in the middle there and little tiki right on the top, which is sitting there. And this community only had 10 families in it, and it didn't matter what size of the village that we would go to, they always had a church. And the far right, with only 10 families, they even had their own church, and that was on the far right.
That's great. That waterfall, one of the tallest waterfalls in the world,
That's correct.
Was it
1,500.
amazing, amazing. And it took forever to get there.
Yeah.
So we met this wood carver by chance. We were catching a view of him as we were driving by. So we went in and knocked, and he said, yeah, come on in. He sells his work to art dealers who put them in galleries on the touristy islands, Tahiti, Bora Bora, and Fiji. And he goes once a year to Tahiti and brings his work with him, and the art dealers bid on it from him. So we were quite amazed, and his work was incredible. He's now marrying little more modern artwork with the traditional tikis, and his tikis really stood out from other ones. And here's an example of tikis everywhere, some in museums and some for sale. It's the way they make a living, but it's a way they commemorate their history and who they are. They're some of the finest craftsmen in French Polynesia. So we met a wood carver on the left on the way. We were walking along just the waterfront, and there's this beautiful little pavilion right along the waterfront, and he was sitting on a bench carving away. So we stopped and chatted with him, and he was carving these little, look on the bench, a little tiny tiki, and that's what he sells in the marketplace. So this is how they make their living. So my tiki souvenir on the right with his island in the background, and of course his name is Khan. Tiki. Okay. Sorry. All right. So we were at a market. It was an open market where all the artisans brought their stuff, and there was these beautiful tapises. A tapis is a wood bark that's been hammered down and made paper thin, and then they take a homemade ink and they draw designs and things on it. So this actually was a chart of the Marquesan Islands.
Oh.
And Candy decided she wanted this, and she came up to the lady and said, you didn't sign it. She said, what? And she said, well, you worked for hours making this. You've got to put your name on the bottom. So here the lady was signing it for Candy, and Candy's brought it home and is going to frame it. Yeah. So, and here's just another famous harbor, to explore. Its soaring spires are very well known. This is kind of the one that you see in all the magazines. So we took another hike to a waterfall, and we found this artisanal chocolate maker with an eclectic house out in the woods. He was a French guy. And of course, we had to bang on a frying pan to be invited in. So here I am banging on the frying pan to get invited up. And of course, he has to feed the ladies by hand. Ooh la la.
He was a very unusual man.
So we went to a church to hear the singing. The story is if you go into the harbors and you're anchored in the Marquesas, you just listen on Sunday morning and you will be serenaded. Well, here it is.
Not choirs, congregations.
It's just everyone singing. So it was really quite amazing. And then all of a sudden, it was time to move on. So we spent 6 weeks touring between the 5 different islands, and then we decided, okay, it was time to go. So we were going to move on to the next island group in French Polynesia, the Tuamotus, about 400 miles away. Now, the Tuamotus and the Marquesas could not be any more different. The Tuamotus have about 80 islands and atolls, and they constitute the largest chain of atolls and are a French provincial output. Now, this is an atoll. It's the top of a volcano that's filled with seawater. One's called the shallow islands or unlucky islands. They're very shallow and flat, in stark contrast to the Marquesas. Cruisers have been through the islands, put together a compendium, and we're able to find a compendium, a list of all the things to do, where to go, what to stay, who to call, all the information you might need for almost every place we've been. And it's been updated and passed along from cruiser to cruiser. So it's been invaluable, actually. So only a handful of atolls have cuts big enough for boats to go through. We visited 5 of these atolls over a 4-week period, and they're dotted with little small sand and volcanic islands around the outside of the rim with these inlets. But many times there were inlets that would allow seawater in or out with the tide. So here's an inlet, and you can see coming in, the current runs really strong in and out of these passes. How much current depends on, are there other outlets? Does it all come through this one? What's the moon cycle? Is the wind or waves blowing towards or away from the atoll? How narrow the pass is, which way it faces in direction? Is there more than one pass? So the current in some of these passes could reach 8 knots. So you had to time it right. And occasionally we did, and once or twice we didn't. So we took pictures of this one because this one was one of the calm ones. We had one where we were going through 9-foot things, and we said, well, I think we kind of blew this one. And we're motoring up through flat out with the motor. And I'm watching the boat speed go down. And when it got below 1 knot and we were just barely inching along, I was like, I'm not sure I could even turn around in this stuff. So, all right. So now we get a navigation moment. So I use the B&G system, and I have Navionics and CMAP, but we lean very, very heavily on OpenCPN, and we display satellite views of all the islands and everywhere we've been. So I have the whole South America, Panama, and the whole South Pacific on satellite views. And I can compare a chart with a satellite view with us on it. And if they don't agree to the satellite view, I trust the satellite view over the chart. So, and for you purists or Luddites, I do have a compass on board. So we have AIS, 2 VHFs, one with AIS, Iridium Go, an inReach satellite communication system, and this year I'm adding Starlink. So we'll be able to email and get web stuff mid-ocean, we hope.
Communication. It's lonely sometimes.
So, well, imagine 23 days in a 40-foot box with one person. All right, so getting through the passes is pretty hairy, but if you calculate it right, you can get through. I never really focused on what was inside the atolls. Should it just be a big valley, a volcano crater that was formed 1 million years ago? Should we go in and we're good to go? No, you see all those little dots in the middle of this thing? They represent the approximate position of 50 to 150 foot tall vents or mini volcanoes coming up from the bottom of the cauldron. Okay, they rise from the seafloor and they've eroded to the point where they're just below the surface of the water. And there are hundreds of them. So this is what it looks like on the left on the satellite view. And in real world, that's what it looks like on the right. So Candy was up on top of the boom and we're motoring between these. I'm trying to watch the satellite view down below and watch the charts, and steering right and left. And Candy's like, oh, there's one there, there's one, there's one. And then we'd get to some place and then we'd have to go out around and come back and find another way.
We also learned that you couldn't go when the sun wasn't right. So if we left too late and then the sun was setting, there were shadows and we couldn't see them. So we had to make sure.
So the sun really had to be right because it would be the wrong direction. So it became really clear that the lookout was required and good old eyeball Mark 1 was required for this one. But once we mastered the atoll navigation and we anchored in the coral with floats, now you anchor and then 50 feet out, you've got to put a float to float your anchor chain. And then 100 feet out, you got to put a float to float your anchor chain. And remember, sometimes you're anchoring in 60 feet of water. So there were times we had all of our chain, almost 300 feet out, but you had to float it because you didn't want it to get hung up. And more than once, we had to really work to get the anchor chain out from around the bommies that were down there. So, and I'm sorry, just another sunset.
Our favorite atoll was Bacaraba.
But we fell in love. We fell in love with the atolls in Tuamotus, as you can see. So here we are trying to get out to the dinghy, and we're about to walk out, and we saw this 5-foot shark investigating the dinghy just as we're about to wade in. So every time we go in, we always throw out a little anchor out the back of the boat and stop it from coming in. That way you can keep it off the coral, or you can keep it off the jetty when you're going, and let the dinghy live another day. So there are many places to snorkel, and the reef passes are fun. So you've got the water running in the reef. So what you do is you take the dinghy out to the outside of the reef, and you hop in the water with your snorkels, and then you get blown along with the current back in with it. So the tide brings you back in. And we learned to watch the dive boats. When the dive boats were all racing out to take their people out, with all the air passengers, we said, oh, time for us to go. And we'd follow them out and come surfing back in. Many of the divers were down 50, 60 feet right over the bottom. And they said in the bottom, there were thousands of sharks all just sleeping on the bottom because the current was going through their gills and they didn't have to swim. So we're still working on our underwater photography. We'll get there. So this lady actually ended up buying a house to set up basically a restaurant, and she offers cruisers at dinner as a business. So we had French, German, Danish, Australian, and US cruisers all for dinner, so all from the harbor. It was really quite amazing. So Candy befriended this beautiful young island girl, and we were invited to her house for dinner. So we brought a good portion of the dinner because we didn't want to stress their budget. But we brought baseball caps, t-shirts, children, art supplies, books, and a good supply of reading glasses. And we gave her mother a bag of goodies, and she was crying. She was emotional, and it was really tough saying goodbye to them.
I think
Yeah, go ahead.
this one was very important to me. She was unable to read texts on her phone because she couldn't read, and her husband was a fisherman and was unable to read charts and even do invoicing for his business of fishing. When I gave them reader cheater glasses, they were able to function, and she was crying. She could finally read texts from her family. But the young man in the back is the 6-month traveling nurse, and they just don't have clinics on these islands, and he just goes and tries to help the villagers for short periods of time. He asked me, I gave him a bag of cheater glasses, and he said he couldn't have been more happy because he could pass them all out to the islanders on the island. We do collect cheater glasses and bring them with us.
Yeah. So we encountered the most prosperous people, and we met the poorest people. And coming in by boat, you tend to meet the fishermen and the people on the water first, and they're usually the poorest people there. And once they learn to trust you, and you start buying fish from them, and they learn that you're there with good things, they would bring us their cell phones to charge for the day. And we'd plug in their cell phones and charge them. Or they'd come over with an empty jug, knowing we had a water maker, and we'd fill it up with fresh water. And it was, and then they sell us fish or lobster. It was just amazing. So we happened upon a village where they were having a festival, and one lady here was a Canadian lady who was
start teaching the dancing to the locals, and she would try and get the cruisers to come in and join them, but they all got it, and they all know how to do it.
And they start learning these dances at an early age. So you can see that everyone knows the dance, and now the next generation is learning.
Look at the little girl on the left. Yeah, she gets it.
So there was great music that was going on here, and at the same time, there were a bunch of guys playing bocce in the dirt on the other side, and they just had a wonderful afternoon. They had really good food. So there were beautiful beaches on the island rim, and they just called for exploration. Now, on one of the islands we went to, there was this beautiful high-end hotel that had the docks that came out with the huts on the ends of the docks. And we thought, wow, maybe we can go over by dinghy and have dinner there. So we went into the office and we said, hey, can we have dinner? And they said, no, we're completely full. Really sorry. But we're having a dance show tonight. And if you want, you could go out to the bar on the end of the dock and have a few drinks, and you could watch the dance show for free. So we said, okay. So here we are. So you get an idea of what's going on. And Candy always wants me to cut these short, and I don't want to cut them short.
How to
So
keep the coconuts, and I have yet to figure that out.
yeah. So we met some other cruising couples, and we were exploring the atolls, and we went to an island that had a pearl farm on it. So we went ashore to explore, and a lady comes out and says, "Can I help you?" in French. And we were able to purchase some beautiful pearls and things for her for a fraction of the cost of the stores. So we bought pearl earrings for what,
$20.
$20?
And they go
Okay.
for 200. It's the only island that makes the black pearls.
So we were in the right place at the right time. So Minda, who on the other boat,
Yes.
Takarava, was the aerobics and yoga instructor. So Candy said, I've got to go over there in the morning, and they would do their workouts on the bow of the boat.
She's 70
So-
years old.
Her husband was navigating by his phone with Navionics. And I said, "Are you crazy?" So I brought over my hard drive with all my charts and OpenCPN, loaded it all on his computer, and got him up into the real world. And he said, "Hey, I've got thousands of movies for you." So I plugged my hard drive in, and we went home, and all night his computer downloaded thousands of movies. So one hand washes the other. So on one island, this was the famous place where a Kon-Tiki landed. The island was marked by a small monument and a plaque that Thor Heyerdahl's son had actually placed there. And it was really quite amazing. So now all of a sudden it was time to say farewell to the Tuamotus and sail for Tahiti and the Society Islands 180 miles away. They're part of French Polynesia. There's 14 islands in the group, and there's Tahiti, Moorea, Raiatea, Bora Bora, and Hawani are the most well-known. And the tallest peak on these islands on Tahiti was 7,300 feet. So it was a 180-mile trip. We wanted to arrive during daylight, so we had to balance getting out of an atoll, the length of the trip, the arrival, and try to get there during daylight. So we left at 7:30 in the morning, sailed through the night, and then arrived at mid-afternoon the next day. And here's Candy on the wheel taking us out through the inlet. So we arrived at the Point Venus anchorage, which is on the outside of Tahiti. And it's famous for its black sandy beaches, and it was the historic landing where Captain Cook and William Bligh landed. The lighthouse is from 1869, and this is where Captain Cook first came to watch the transit of Venus from the South Pacific in 1769. So then we went into Tahiti, and we went to the Marina de Papeete, which is in the middle of the bustling city. We were where the yellow dot was, really close to the town, and we were able to walk into town and see everything there. They had waterfront restaurants, shops, rental car agencies, but it was very, very, very busy city.
And it's also COVID has really not done well for the city. It's homelessness is a problem, and the city has really gotten very dirty. So they're working very hard to bring it back.
So our dock was really nice, and the marina was beautiful, but the cruise ship came in right behind us. So while we're at the cruise ship or the dock, we could hear all night their endless PA system saying, "People on the B deck go down to the Lido deck to go ashore," and they were just announcing every single day. And at night, they would show Disney movies up on the screen on the top deck, and we could sit in the cockpit and watch a Disney movie. So, but the marina had underwater lighting. There was actually a little coral garden there. It was a beautiful little marina. So as we were walking for the day in Papeete, we found some Girl Scout leaders and doing their season opening event. And Candy had always been a Girl Scout leader, so she had great camaraderie with them, and was nice to see all the kids out and about. It's a pretty active group. So across the way, we saw a local church, and we heard the music here was exceptional. Now, everyone wears white. So all the ladies had white hats and white things on. All the men had white suits. We were banished to the balcony as tourists.
This is the congregation again, and they sit in particular orders, and I couldn't understand why until they're sitting in organized altos, sopranos, tenors, and then the men are on one side, and then they would stop. So the women would stop, and the men would sing, and they had this whole orchestrated together, and it was a congregation. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Really amazing. So that was fun. So we went off to explore. We found the presidential palace, some beautiful churches, the government buildings for the territory, some scenic gardens and waterfalls. And then we went on a tour with a rental car. We're 3/4 now. It's not like Candy to not make plans. Okay. Usually everything is very scripted out, probably for 3 days in advance. So we're going around the back of this island, and Candy says, wow, we have no place to stay tonight. And so she gets on her phone, starts going through and start making phone calls. Busy, 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 you know, and then, oh, we've got an opening. Somebody just canceled. So we drive up to this place, and it was an eco lodge. You know, that was absolutely incredible on a mountainside overlooking a beautiful bay. We met a French couple there, and they've invited us to come back and meet them in France when we get there.
Everything was natural wood. There was no glass. It's all open air. It was absolutely incredible.
And the bottom left, all that rock is the shower. Okay. And this is the view. So it's a lush Tahitian garden. You know, it's amazing. And there on the right is the smallest island in the Tahitian group, barely big enough to fit a small fishing hut. So next we went to Moorea. Now Moorea is only 12 miles away. So, you know, you just go pop over to the next island. It's far less commercial than Tahiti, without all the traffic and the city bustle. And this reinforced our image of what French Polynesia should really be like. This is the view from Magic Mountain Lookout. So the Jeep had to go up to a certain point, and then to get to the very last part of the hill, he had to back up all the way because there was no room at the top to turn around. So we're backing up this, the wheels are spinning, and we're looking over the edges, and we're up, what, you know, 4,000 feet here. It was fun. So, and we went to a pineapple farm, which was very interesting to see. And here's a view of some of the cutbacks on the island going down. So we stopped along a stream to visit the eels who were fed by the tour guides. And in one mountainside restaurant, they had a spectacle of when you didn't finish everything on your plate, they'd go over to the stream and scrape it off into the water. And this is what you saw.
Oh. So I was on a hike the following day, and they don't make bridges or causeways as you're going. You have to go through the rivers to get on these hikes. And as I was going through one of the rivers, these little fellows were all around my
Wrapped
legs.
around her ankles.
Oh, not happy camper.
So one night we were heading back to the boat in the dinghy, and these kids came out in their vas. Now a va is sometimes carved from a wooden log, sometimes they're fiberglass. You know, it's an ama, an aka, a vaca, but it's basically a little tiny canoe with an outrigger. And they came along and wanted to race. So it was really fun, and we just had a good time with them. They were really nice kids. And afterwards, they came whipping by the boat, giving us a fist bump, you know, to say thank you. It was really cute. So now we went around and took an anchorage, and we were near a place called Stingray City. Stingray City was particularly important to us because, as the name might imply, there are stingrays. So you go out in your dinghy and you go about 4 feet of water, and this is what you find. So we brought a can of tuna fish, and you put a little tuna fish in your hand and hold it down, and they swim right up to you, and then you release it just before they get to you, and you can feed the stingrays.
So stingrays feel rubbery like a portobello mushroom, and sharks actually feel like sandpaper. Because
Candy was feeding a stingray on one hand, and a shark went by, so she reached out and patted his tail. So, and we had so much fun at this place. We went back 3 days in a row. So you can see his little mouth underneath. And they just let you pet them. They're used to it, and they swim around. They kind of sit on the bottom until somebody comes over. And then we took another hike to a Polynesian dance show at what they call Tiki Village. And this was a reenactment of a traditional wedding ceremony. So we have tons of these kind of videos, but we can only show you two.
So the husband and the wife are in the middle, and the wedding party is surrounding them on the outside. All right, next.
Boy.
And
And
the
then-
fire dances were just.
And here was the fire
spectacular.
dance at the end of the night.
They stand on each other's shoulders and they do a really good job.
It was fun. So we were told by another cruiser that there was an expat Hawaiian ukulele player, luthier, who was making custom guitars. And this custom guitar was for Mick Fleetwood of Fleetwood Mac. So he was recommended by this other cruiser. And the way he told us to get there was go out the channel, turn left at the second pipe post in the water, weave your way through the coral patches, land underneath a tree and tie to the tree, and then bang on his door.
We found him.
And then here's what the guitar looked like. So the next thing we wanted to do was our last day in Moorea. We wanted to go see the whales because we have not really been in the water with them. So we went on a snorkel trip to see the whales. So we went zooming out, and we were with a guy who, the one guy was running the boat, and we had about 8 people in the boat. And this guy stood there like this.
He's called the Whale Whisperer.
And he was telling the guy which way to
Where to
drive.
go.
And he's like, here. And he goes. And then he goes over, grabs his snorkel, grabs his masks, and slides into the water. And he's like, psh. So we slid into the water. We went off swimming. And this is all I could get on photo. It's about a 50 or 70-foot mother with a 30-foot baby. And they were just diving. They had had some time at the surface, and they just. So absolutely amazing. So pardon the jumpy pictures. I'm really not much of an underwater photographer yet. So now we're into October, and it was next to 90-mile voyage to Hawaii in the town of Fair. So it's only 29 miles square, and it has, or square miles, and it's 195 feet tall. So we happened to be there just when there was this monster race that's called the Hawaii Nui Va race. So it's raced in high-tech 6-man vase, fiberglass, 129 kilometers over 3 days in 3 stages without changing crew. So it's the largest race in the region, and it illustrates their strong links with the French Polynesian sea traditions. So this is their national sport. So on race day, the whole island turned out. The support crews came out on speedboats, and we were right in the front lines because we were anchored right along the channel. Candy is from Australia, was born in Australia. So she had to get a picture with the team from Australia, and they couldn't figure out why she had an English accent or American accent, because she was born there but came here when she was 5. So
They didn't do too well in the race, unfortunately.
yeah. So race day was wet and foggy, not what they had all hoped for, but there were we had anchored right off the channel, and here they are just racing right past us. It was really quite amazing. So the next day we took a walk, we took a bicycle ride, and we were just going out exploring because we have these little folding bikes, the Twinkie things, and we just ride them right. So we're out and about, and we found this on the left-hand side. This is fish traps that were designed so that the fish would come in with the tide and get trapped down inside, and the locals would just come down with a spear and spear them. And these are over 1,000 years old, and they're still using them today. So up on the upper right were the ruins of the religious platforms where they used to live. So, and then we found a ukulele jamboree just in the marketplace with everyone playing. So it was really quite amazing. So then we left Hawaii Nui, and we sailed 25 miles to the entrance of Taha, the next island over. And we went in where it was marked with the green dot in the bottom right. Then we motored around inside the reef to the purple spot where we went snorkeling at the Coral Gardens. And then we exited the island at the red dot on the far side. And this is the same route the Vaz followed as part of their racetrack going through. It's only 34 square miles, 1,900 feet tall, and has 5,200 people. And from the Coral Gardens, while we're snorkeling, right over there, that's Bora Bora in the background. So it After 4 days, it was time to move on to Bora Bora. And there were some other people. We stayed in an inn there for a couple of nights, which was actually quite fun. And so we met some other people and they were going to Bora Bora. And we said, well, come on the boat. We'll take them with us. So that actually ended up very nice. So we had to get to Bora Bora and we had to go in around the reef all the way outside of Bora Bora and then in through the main channel. So you can see on the right, the satellite view, what our route was and how the satellite views are helpful. So here again is the chart view and the satellite view of the inner harbor. So the folks came with us. One girl unfortunately started to get seasick, but I can tell you the seasick ended and she perked up considerably when, as we came through the pass, the dolphins all started jumping off the bow of the boat. So she felt great. So we were very, very disappointed because we saw Bora Bora, you see these overwater bungalows and beautiful sunsets and dancing and music and harbor excursions. When cruisers come in, you see a different experience. See how tourism has transformed the island and subordinated the islanders into working for the hotels and the restaurants. And there's very, very little trickle down in the economy. And there were always 1 or 2 cruise ships in the harbor. So Bora Bora also has draconian mooring rules. So there were only about 6 different mooring areas, and each mooring area had 5 or 7 or 10 moorings, and that's it. If they were full, there was one little overspill where you could possibly anchor for a short period of time. Otherwise, they told you, leave, come back later. So a launch comes around to collect the fees, and the cost was $50 for 3 days or $100 a week. And there used to be derelict boats there, but these new mooring things have chased all the derelict stuff out. So of course we went to Bloody Mary's, the restaurant, which serenaded by a duo playing beautiful music. So then we got out the bikes again. We did another circumnavigation of Bora Bora on the bicycles. And Candy said, stop, because she saw this sign on the right-hand side. So this is a private museum owned and operated by a model shipbuilder. I was instantly in heaven. The models were National Museum quality. They represented yachting from the Polynesian days to the current age. And the artist was really personable, really laid back and shared stuff. And I was able to walk through and say, oh, that's I could name almost every boat going through. And he was like, oh, you know your boats. We had a lot of fun. But the back of the island is the part, unfortunately, where all the locals live. So the front end is all glitz and hotels and restaurants. The back, unfortunately, is very much poverty, where the hotel staffs for the resorts park their cars and take the shuttles out to the reefs. So it's really tough.
What's happened with these hotels, which is very disappointing to me, is as they've all fallen apart and started to deteriorate, instead of managing them and getting rid of them and doing the proper thing, they're just letting them deteriorate and they're walking away from them. So more than half of the properties, the entire coastal area, are just run down, dilapidated bungalows. And it's just a shame that they've really ruined the coastline.
And these big corporations are just allowed to get away with it. So Candy heard some traditional music in the background and yelled, stop, stop, stop. So we saw this.
This is just a gym class in a local elementary school, and they're teaching them the dances.
So in one island, we heard that they were going to a dance competition. And we're like, oh, great, you're going to have practices. We'd love to come see the practice. I said, we don't practice. We've known these dances since we were 3 or 5 years old. We know who the best dancers are. We just send them. So we picked up a mooring off of the Bora Bora Yacht Club and made it our home base for a few days. It's little more than a great restaurant with a dinghy dock, but it was privately owned. It had a wonderful crew. They really looked after us, and it was wonderful. And here's what sunset off the yacht club looked like. And of course, it was time to go to another island dance show at the St. James Resort. So we were able to get picked up by a driver and driven halfway around the island for the show. And it was a great show, dedicated troupe. And so you can see, it was really quite amazing. And then it was time to leave. So 9 days in Bora Bora, it was over and we were moving on. So now we had to jump from from the societies to Rarotonga and the Cook Islands. So as you can see, the groups are broken up by the Marquesas, the Tuamotus, the societies, the Cooks, and we're working our way through. We were starting to feel rushed because we had to get to Fiji before typhoon season started. So we had to get out of the box or my insurance wouldn't cover me, and I had paid in advance for a slip in Fiji. So this was a 620-mile trip, 4.5 days, and we ended. Now, Rarotonga is unlike any other island that we had gone to. It's very, very industrial, a tiny, bitty little harbor, and the harbor master was busy. So we called and said, we'd like to come in. And he said, oh, well, we'll call you when it's time. So please stand off the island. So the wind was blowing over 20 knots. And as you get from the deep, deep water to the shallow water, the waves pick up. So we spent 7 hours going back and forth off this island to the point we were just going to say hell with it and leave. We finally got the call to proceed inside. So, and during this trip, we had a weather guru looking over our shoulder that I had paid for. He was the head meteorologist of the New Zealand weather department, who now was doing weather routing. And it was really good because the South Pacific weather really complicated. So I felt much better, doing my thing and then having him look over my shoulder. So in this harbor, we were instructed to tie to this horrible concrete jetty and have customs, immigration, and health all inspect us. So we put out every fender we had to keep the boat off the jetty, and we watched in amazement as a 700-foot freighter came in behind us, warped off the jetty, swung around 180 degrees, and ended up 30 feet away from us. So it was pretty crazy. So, and we hear that they have as many as 8 to 10 yachts all along this jetty. So we had 2 anchors out in the bow, 2 lines ashore, and used the dinghy as a shuttle to move back and forth, and then had to figure out how to tie the dinghy off the jetty so it wouldn't get bashed to death. So there's just no facilities, and cruisers are a nuisance.
But the island is incredible. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful island.
So we were riding our bikes around. We got off to a late start because I was rebuilding a sump pump. Okay, so but we found this guy who does these ornate wooden outrigger canoes done in the ancient style, hand cutting and carving, lashing with coconut husk braid line. He was a really interesting character. He's actually behind the bow of it, but the picture of him is on the right. He's a nonprofit. He's supported by foreign investors and organizations, and people travel from all the other islands to learn this ancient skill. So we did another hike to a prominent peak called the Needle. And yes, up there in the top middle picture, that's me climbing up through the roots of a tree to get to up the walkway. Or
the top of the Needle is the highest point in the mountain. It's been hit by lightning so many times, it's now magnetized. You can actually put something to hold on to the ground.
So we signed up for a progressive dinner hosted by island families, that both as a tourism business and also as an educational opportunity to sample traditional food and customs. So most of the visitors were air tourists, and we were the only yachties, and they were astounded the fact that we actually had sailed here. So we had Asian influence, curries, beef, chicken, dessert. It's phenomenal with chocolate and pineapple cakes. It was really, really good. And they even have pavlova, which is an Australian dessert that's very famous. So we wanted to go visit Palmerston Island, which is a tiny little island just off of the island. And it only has 30 people on it who take turns hosting visiting yachts. It was founded by William Marsters back in the 1800s. He had 2 Polynesian wives, and he set one on each side of the atoll. And then he went off and got a 3rd wife, so he set her up. And he ended up having 23 children, and the descendants populate the island, but there are more descendants off island than there are on island. So we met the mayor at the progressive dinner, and he was encouraging us to come visit. He was getting a ride back on the police boat 300 miles to Palmerston, and he was like, I'll get you so that you can come. But unfortunately, they were still closed with COVID, and they weren't really ready to open, so we missed that one. So we went to an island heritage site, and the locals keep the past alive by reenacting the coronation of a tribal leader in the exact same site where their forefathers held the same ceremonies 1,000 years before.
That chief there is actually a descendant of the family that owned that property.
Way back when. So
This is the entrance as you come in. He's welcoming us in.
So they had wonderful dinners and things that were cooked in the pits on hot stones wrapped in leaves and things. And it was delicious, the fish and chicken and other stuff. So, and of course they had a dance show. So we liked the dance show. It was really fun. But actually the funniest part was, so the natives embraced the Christianity as a means for getting away from cannibalism because they were kind of knew that it was wrong. And the elders of the tribes were very instrumental in getting their people to find peaceful ways of life instead of warring with each other. So these are ladies who put on the show 30 years ago, but they
can still do it today.
So see, no matter what you think, there still is hope. So, and then it was time again to press on. So we had to get 2 anchors up and the warps off the thing and get off the pier. So we had to go 600 miles to the tiny island of Niue, which is a protectorate of New Zealand, but it's one of the smallest countries in the world. 101 square miles, 1,900 people, 300 feet tall, really hard to see. It's a giant flat pancake. So we were mostly motoring, and it was hard to keep the exhaust fumes from coming over the stern of the boat. So we get to Niue, and they have a couple of moorings for boats to visit, but there's what?
You're the first boat.
Oh yeah, we were the first boat in 3 years to get there.
Allowed us to come in.
So that we were like celebrities on the island. It was hilarious. So getting ashore is a little different because of its lack of a harbor. You've got to come in on this jetty, which is exposed to the ocean swells, and you've got to get to the jetty and then hook the dinghy onto a hoist and hoist the dinghy out onto the top of the jetty immediately. So we did it for a few days and then got the hang of it. And Candy said, okay, this is getting old. So we went and we were able to call around and found, and unfortunately, half the hotels and half the restaurants all were out of business because of COVID. And then people had gone to New Zealand and Australia to make a living. So we were able to get a place, and we were very lucky.
She opened it just for us and gave us the main lodge.
So Keith was the head, the guy in the picture there was the head of the Niue Yacht Club, which is the biggest little club in the world. And so we got T-shirts, and we were the honorary members of the Niue Yacht Club.
It hasn't even got a club. It's no building.
So, but they were in trouble because everything was dwindling. There were only a couple people volunteering. And it's funny, for an island that is dependent on people coming to visit, they really had no infrastructure for welcoming them or doing anything with them. So we wrote an article to Noonsite, which is a clearinghouse for cruisers information. And they put out a post, and all of a sudden money started flowing in and information started flowing in. And the Niue government took attention to this. And now the tourism board is working closely with the yacht club. They now have showers done. They've got meeting place done, a little place for cruisers to hang out. And it's like changed their world. So it was nice to be a little part of that. But we know the Ark with like 50 boats in it is on its way. So the boats are coming. And if they don't get together, they're going to be left behind. So Niue was unbelievable. Picture perfect South Pacific island. It's the rock walls are about 50 foot tall on it. So it was really tough to get SIM cards and get phones and things to work because they made a leap from old technology to new technology. And my old Samsung phone wouldn't do 4G. They had jumped to 4G. So here, Mr. Technology couldn't connect. So I had to beg Candy to turn on her hotspot, So
My phone.
that was really hard. So the island features sea tracks, which are these tracks down along the outside down to the water. They're like ravines that come down. So each sea track was unique, and some led to tidal pools where there were poisonous sea snakes here. One where Captain Cook arrived and his entourage was repelled by the cannibals. Amazing stuff. So it was really quite fun. And we found that throughout the islands, they have a reverential attitude toward their forefathers and can often be seen tending ancient graves. So here we have a really modern grave with marble headstones alongside an ancient rock burial cairn. So it's really tough to dig in this underlying soil because it's all rock and coral. So every island or every village took care of their local sites and really did a nice job of keeping things looking good. So here's with some of the caves in some of these things as we went down. And Here was a chasm where the royalty used to swim because it was so well protected way back when. Now, traveling with Candy is sometimes fun. This is what happens when she leads an adventure. So here we're climbing down the steep ladder marked danger, keep out, to find this beautiful beach inside of these rocks and wondering how the sand actually got inside the rocks. So here we are. Now, it was all too soon. It was time to press on. But first we had to get all of our stuff and everything out. So we had some laundry done. Oh, the place we rented, the lady gave us like a 4-room bungalow with a washer, dryer, and a kitchen for the price of a little tiny bungalow because she had had no visitors for 3 years. So we got to do our laundry. So so we had to get all of our stuff out to the boat. So the problem was that the swell was up considerably, and this was going to be a challenge. So we were lucky to have a local fishing captain help us with the wave timing. We had to count a series of 5 waves with a 30-second lull to drop the dinghy, get the engine going, and get out to through the next wave. And this is what we were up against.
There's the boat outside, and there's the dinghy.
And I'm hanging in the dinghy from the crane, waiting for the waves to go through so I could go. Or you're going to be, swept onto the reef. So
The lull came. He had his 30 seconds. He dropped the dinghy down, disconnected the boat, dropped the engine in, started the engines. Thank God it started.
and then
I had to move on.
the video ended. So did I make it?
Did the dinghy make?
Yeah. Yes, we did, but not until I ran out to the boat and came back in for Candy. Now, coming in for Candy and 4 gallons of diesel, or 4 jerry jugs, 5-gallon jerry jugs of diesel, was really fun. So we don't have a video of this because it really would have been incredible. She came down this little staircase right by the jetty and was holding on to the railing with all of her strength. The waves were coming in and coming up to her waist and then going back down again as it went through. I came in with a dinghy and jammed the dinghy up into the corner of the staircase and floored the engine to hold the nose in place. Candy jumped inside the dinghy, and the captain grabbed the 5-gallon jerry jugs and tossed them to Candy. Like they were. So Candy's grabbing these jugs and putting them in place midair. Thank God she goes to the gym. So all in 30 seconds before the next wave came in to catch it. So we finally made it back. This is the sunset. Somebody had given Candy a beautiful flower head.
And we popped a
thing.
glass of wine.
And yes, we immediately had a nice stiff drink and a barbecue. And we realized the wonderful week spent on this island. It was really incredible. So now we had a 2-day voyage to the next island, Tonga. Now on the picture here, you see we started way over on the right with the green dot. And now we've worked our way through the island chains to where we're with the yellow dot. So, so that was 1,000 miles or so, easily. So the quick 270-mile hop, we're in Tonga, and going into Tonga was kind of interesting. The chart looks very, very complicated, but once you get through, it's really not that bad. So Tonga ends up being beautiful. So it's the oldest of last remaining Polynesian monarchy, and it's the only Pacific island never brought under foreign rule. There are 171 islands there in 4 different groups. We spent our time in the northern Vavau group. 61 islands in Vavau are intertwined with beautiful turquoise water encircled with reefs, creating one of the most popular and sheltered cruising grounds on the planet. And it's an important breeding ground for humpback whales, one of the few places you can swim with whales. So when we arrived there, this boat was in front of us. It turned out that it was a steel yacht made by a Russian guy, and his son was going to be drafted by the Russians because the Russians were coming through like to stop signs and pulling young men out of the cars and drafting them. So they wanted to get away. So his son joined the father, and they sailed the boat away while their wives and children were able to fly to Argentina. But they wanted to save the boat because Dad made it. So we caught them, and they were getting ready for a 68-day passage to Argentina. So It was, they were,
Going from Russia through the Northern Passage and they'd stopped in Tonga for gas and food. And then they were just going from Tonga to Argentina.
and it was just amazing. Their English was really good, and it was just
Spirits
so,
were wonderful.
and we said, we are with you.
And
you
they
know.
have communicated with us, they made it. And
Yeah.
they're with their families.
Yeah, we got emails back later. So here we were touring the islands. We went into this called Swallow Cave. So you go in, we tried to bring the dinghy in there, but the swells were too big. So we went into Swallow Cave and we snorkeled. And it was really, really nice to get inside there. So that was beautiful. So we stayed with these friends who we met, and they invited us over. Now this is in a restaurant, we met a guy who is actually a girl now. He's called a Faka lady. And it's a distinctive feature of their culture where the fifth daughter, if they have too many sons, one is chosen to become a girl to help with the house chores and things. So he's chosen to do this. And it's really, kind of a hard place for him to be because he can't have really relationships. They're respected in their society very much. He was very open to us because we talked for 2 days about just approaching her to talk about it. And she said, no problem. So he really wants to live in this community and stay there, even though he knows there would be places that would be more accepting of her. So we brought more stuff into a place. There was a New Zealand expat who opened a Tropicana Cafe, and that's where all the yachties get their information. So he had gotten some small sailing dinghies, was putting together a kids sailing project, and we were happy to bring in T-shirts and hats and other things. And then we also gave him more cheater glasses to pass out. And we had carried around 4 crates of children's books and school supplies on the boat, waiting to find a good home. And we finally found one. The children's library was in dire need of books in English. So with fewer resources available, they were to the point where they were giving school supplies as Christmas gifts. And our contributions were really appreciated. And we happened to be there on graduation day. So these are students of the public school. And you can see that the guys are all dressed in the traditional outfit where they wear a sulo. It's like a skirt. And the different colors represent what school they went to. There were different colors for church schools and different colors for public schools. Then we went to another church and we heard some really, really nice singing. We're fine. So what was nice about this was it was a baptism. And we were really interested in the baptism, what went on. But we found the story later that this couple had tried to have a child for 12 years and couldn't. So his brother donated or gave them their newly born child as a baby to go. So we are minutes. We found a really nice bar where they built it around a 50-something foot yacht. And then pretty soon it was time to head to Fiji. So cyclone season was coming upon us and it was time to get going. So we took off. As we took off, it was a long run and we had to motor. The weather was changing. There was a lot of wind and no wind. There was, beautiful things and then it would pour all day. So we knew. We arrived and we were asked to take the customs buoy well off the marina. Yeah. And it seemed that customs had come and gone and they couldn't check in for 2 days. So some quick radio calls and email to the customs office and Candy's tearful discussion with the marina crew. And
they felt bad for me.
We were finally told to proceed to the customs dock and enter the marina. We may still have a Christmas. Customs, immigration, health, and everybody came through. And this year we had covered 8,591 miles. So as we got there, the crew came out and sang hello to us. And then it was all too soon for Candy to fly home, and we pulled the boat out and put it in a pit. A pit entails digging a big slot, dropping the keel down inside, putting it on tires, and strapping the boat down so when the typhoon comes through at 120 knots, you won't blow over. So, and here's just another sunset in the marina. And thank you very much. What?